Good morning to all of you. I'm Sonam Dubey. Um, I'm the assistant professor in SIRT Bhopal. So today I'm discussing about the basics of computer networking, in which I have discussed about the connection-oriented and connection-less services. Now, a connection-oriented services. A connection-oriented services is a network service that was designed and developed after the telephone system. A connection-oriented services is used to create an end-to-end connection between the sender and the receiver. In connection-oriented services, first of all, when we design any network, so we have to require basically two types of services, that it may be either connection-oriented services and the second one is connection-less services. In connection-oriented services, that is basically used for to create end-to-end connection between the sender and receiver for transmitting the data over either in the same or different network. Connection-oriented services basically provided by the TCP/IP, that is stand for Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol. So connection-oriented services mainly required to establish the establishment and the termination of the processes. Suppose there is one example, a sender wants to send the data to the network. So it has sent a synchronous signal to the receiver for requesting a signal, and for response of the receiver, it sends the synchronous acknowledgement back to the server. It is a response message of the receiver. After that means the connection is established between the sender and receiver. And then after a connection establishment, a sender wants to send data to the receiver directly. There is no interruption, and after completion all the messages, it sends back to the receiver, and after response by the receiver sends the termination message to the sender. This is the response message of receiver. The meaning of this message is to requesting to server to terminate the connection. So that is connection oriented services. So the real example of connection oriented services is a telephonic connection or telephone system. If someone call to another, so that just call up the person, and after connection, there is a connection between a sender and a receiver. Means there are connection between two users. After ringing the bell, there is a connection establishment. So the sender say anything to the sender receiver B. So this is a connection oriented services. Now, the second one is, this is a diagram for connection oriented services, in which slide you can just see the device A connected to the devices B. And in between device A and B, there are a lot of packets of data. Suppose device A wants to send the data to device B. So each packet have personal sequence number, in which format they have forwarded to the device B. So in connection oriented services, the basic services is all the packets are in the same order, and they just reached by the receiver. Okay, now The TCP. TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol. It is a connection-oriented protocol that allows the communication between two or more computers devices by establishing connection in the same or different networks. That means if we are using a TCP IP protocol, that is basically uses the connection-oriented services because it has needed to establishment and the termination of the connection between the sender and receiver. So we can just say it is the most important protocol that uses the internet protocol to transfer the data from one end to another. So that's why it is said to be TCP IP. Now, the second one is connectionless services. A connection is similar to a postal system in which each letter taking place along with different route path from the source to destination addresses. That means a sender sends data to the receiver directly without any establishment and the termination. So this is very required when the sender wants to send data in speedily. So in connectionless services, there is no time consuming process because there is no required of termination and establishment of any type of connection. So in connectionless services, basically using a network system to transfer the data from one end to another end without creating any connection. It does not require establishing a connection before sending the data from the sender to receiver. Now, you can see this is the diagram for connectionless communication, in which we can see a device A just interact with the device B by sending the data in the form of packets. Suppose device A send the data to the device B, so the packets are not in order. Now, the example of connectionless services. UDP stands for User Datagram Protocol. It is a connectionless protocol that allows communication between two or more devices without establishing any connection. In this protocol, a sender sends the data package to the receiver. That means the UDP protocol does not allow to any interruption in case of establishment and termination. Means the sender directly send the data package to the receiver that hold the destination address. So in case of UDP, it also ensure to deliver of data package to the correct destination, but it does not generate any acknowledgement about the sender's data. So in we can say there is no security. Suppose in case of any failure, sender does not responsible for it because there is no acknowledgement received by the receiver. Now, we can see the comparison between both the connection-oriented services and connection-less services. Now, the first one is related system. The connection-oriented services basically designed for telephonic system, and the connection-less services basically based on the postal system. In telephonic system, sender just call to the receiver and they just establish a connection between sender and receiver. And after the conversation, the receiver acknowledges the sender. But in case of postal system, it is just broadcasting the messages. That means a sender wants to send data to the receiver, so it directly send the data to the receiver without any creation of connections. Now the second one is definition. It is used to create an end-to-end connection between the senders to the receiver before transmitting the data over the same or different network. So the connection-oriented services may require basically establish the connection, and after sending the overall messages, it requires the termination of processes. But in case of connectionless services, it does not transfer the data packets between sender and receiver. So without creating any connection. Now the third one is virtual path. That means in connection oriented services, there is a virtual path between sender and receiver. But in case of connectionless services, there is no virtual connection or path between the sender and receiver. Now the fourth one is authentication. It requires authentication before transmitting the data package to the receiver. So in connection oriented services, we can see there is some kinds of authentication because it requires the acknowledgement from the receiver. So there is a proper authentication mechanism in connection oriented services, and in connectionless services, there is no authentication is required. Now the second one is fifth one is data packets path. All data packets are received in the same order as those sent by the sender. That means when we receive all the data packets from the sender that are in same order. But in case of connectionless services, there is no arrangement. That means all data packets are received in not in the same order as those sent by the sender. And the sixth one is bandwidth required. It requires a higher bandwidth to transfer the data packets because there is a need of connection establishment. So they have required a higher bandwidth, higher frequency data cables to send transfer the data from sender to destination, either in the same network or it may be different. But in case of connectionless services, it does not require low bandwidth. It does not require any higher bandwidth or frequency to transfer the data. It only assume low bandwidth data transfer. And its seventh one, data reliability. It is more reliable connection services because it has guarantee to data packets transfer from one end to other with a connection. It is not a reliable services because it does not guarantee the transfer of data packet from one end to other for establishing a connections. And now the eighth one is congestion. There is no congestion as it provides a proper mechanism to transfer the data from sender to receiver. But in case of connectionless services, there is a problem of congestion because a sender sends all over the data to the receiver. So because there is no acknowledgement received by the receiver, so there is a problem of congestion. So this is maybe required when the sender wants to send the data very high speed and there is no security issue. So we can send the data by connectionless services. Okay. Yes. Now, thank you.